because a new report from the Wall Street Journal takes a look at the rising number of Americans struggling to make ends meet while feeling stuck at their current jobs. According to the Journal, despite unemployment rates remaining low, there are signs people are having difficulty finding a stable full-time job, leading many to take up part-time work instead. I want to bring in now the author of that piece, economics correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Harriet Torrey. Harriet, tell us more about your report. What's stopping Americans from pursuing the jobs that they actually want? Because I think your headline encapsulates something that's really fascinating here. People can get jobs, just not ones that are comparable to the ones that they left. Maybe they're not even full-time at all.
Yeah, what we've seen over the past year or so is that the labor market has really slowed. We've seen much slower job creation in the past few months. But another interesting thing that the Labor Department puts out every month is various different measures of the unemployment rate. So the headline unemployment rate is still only 4.3%. That's pretty low. But they look at different types of measures of unemployment and they ask various questions about, are you are you discouraged looking for the labor market, or are you in a part-time job and would you prefer a full-time job? And that particular rate, which is called U6, is at its highest in nearly 4 years. And that is just a very broad measure of the Labor Department. And it shows that people who are somewhat on the sides of the labor market are really starting to struggle. And this is a rate that we've seen creep up over the past 2 years. And it's now at this nearly 4-year high. So that is definitely a sign that there are a lot of people out there who are not able to get into the jobs that they want. And they're really taking anything that they can get. And in my reporting, I spoke to a lot of people with very, great credentials, PhDs in academia, great undergraduate degrees in tech. And some of them are working at, sandwich shops or working as part-time nannies because they really can't find anything else. And they've been applying for hundreds of jobs for months and months and months and not even really had much of a nibble from anyone. It's just a very discouraging situation for a lot of people who want to work and have, a great background for many jobs. They're just really struggling to find the job that they want. So they're taking kind of whatever they can get.
I was so drawn to your reporting over the weekend, in part because I think that in reading it, I almost wonder if people are going to feel a little bit of validation, like, OK, it's not just me trying to get a job and not being able to find one that's commensurate to my experience level. But then, of course, if you think about it in the more macro sense, we read your story against the backdrop of a week where the Fed is likely to make moves on interest rates. So how might this trend that you're reporting on influence future economic policy decisions, such as the one that we're tracking for this week's Fed meeting?
I think we're just seeing more and more signs that there's just that little bit of strain in the labor market. I mean, we saw it last week with initial jobless claims. They were up to their highest since October 2021 as well. It's just this gradual sort of drip, drip, drip of things just starting to feel a little bit more difficult for people who are out there and who are looking for work. And, after the story ran, my inbox was full from readers saying, I'm having the same problem. I had a great job and it's been 10 months or 12 months and I've really not been able to find anything else. It's hard. A lot of people, since the pandemic, there are a lot more remote jobs, but people at this point seem to be really struggling to get them. They're so coveted because you could stay in your hometown. You might not necessarily have to move to a different city for work. But, there are so many applications and people say I send out, 1,000 applications and I get a rejection email within 20 minutes because I'm being filtered out, by some system. They just feel very discouraged. They don't understand why this is happening. And it just seems to be just a difficult time all around for people when they're trying to find their feet and trying to find a stable job, leading them into the type of job that they perhaps thought that they wouldn't have to do, like a service sector job or really any job that's completely outside of their fields.
But I think that that's the question, right? Is it that the hiring practice of these companies has changed? Is it that they're using AI and so good candidates are just getting weeded out because it's not a person who's actually looking at their resumes? Or is it a sign that the economy might not be as healthy as some would have you think?
I think when you speak to individual people, they do feel very frustrated with the way that they submit applications. And actually, funny enough, the people who are working, they tend to say, the reason I got this job was because somebody who lives near me, somebody in my social circle, or, just walking from place to place, striking up a conversation is the way that I, have been getting actual interviews with people and, things like that. So I think that there is still a lot to be said for this, in your town, the personal collection and sending out these AI resumes that might get filtered out through a system is very frustrating for some people. So it does seem like the labor market is changing in many ways. Job seekers complain that they feel like jobs are being advertised that maybe don't exist. It's a difficult time all around. At the same time, the labor market, the unemployment rate does remain relatively low. So, it's not like a moment to panic about the labor market. That's what economists said who I spoke to in the piece. They just say this is something to watch. This is this creeping, gradual cooling in the labor market. But for individuals who are stuck in this situation where they have a PhD and they're having to do a service sector job, it is, of course, a very difficult time, and they feel very frustrated.
A very difficult and frustrating time for job seekers. And I think it's one of those moments, again, where you think about, okay, the economy might be healthy or good, but it might not feel that way to the people who find themselves looking for a job and unable to get one. I thought the piece was really great, mixing personal stories with the actual data. Harriet Tari, thank you for coming on and talking about it with us.
Thanks, Ali.